You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
Cyber threats are evolving every second, and staying ahead is more than just a challenge, it's a necessity. That's why we're thrilled to partner with ThreatLocker, the cybersecurity solution trusted by businesses worldwide. ThreatLocker is a full suite of solutions designed to give you total control, stopping unauthorized applications, securing sensitive data, and ensuring your organization runs smoothly and securely. Visit threatlocker.com today to see how a default deny approach can keep your company safe and compliant. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts tracking down the threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems, and protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
In my opinion, the impact to real life individuals, the disruption to their work, to their healthcare, to their schools, cities, libraries, homes, is very, very significant by threat actors, especially ransomware threat actors. And I just think that historically, it has been underappreciated and under-resourced in terms of defense against these threats.
That's Selena Larson, threat researcher and lead for intelligence analysis and strategy at Proofpoint. The research we're discussing today is titled, Why Biasing Advanced Persistent Threats Over Cybercrime is a Security Risk. Well, let's walk through some of the history here together. I mean, how did we coin the term advanced persistent threat, and what led us to where we are today?
Yeah, so it's funny because the APT moniker, which is, of course, advanced persistent threat and is essentially only used for threat actors that are operating on behalf of states, right? So Russia, China, DPRK, all of these, big time bad actors that are operating on behalf of intelligence agencies all over the world, advanced persistent threats. So I was digging through the history, the resources, and it was reportedly first coined in 2007 by a U.S. Air Force colonel named Greg Rattray. So this is, of course, based off of stuff that people have posted on Twitter, blogs. There's no real sort of point in the dictionary definition when it was added to, the Webster's English dictionary that we can say this is when it was created.
I can add, just as a name-dropping aside here, that I have interviewed Greg, and he did indeed claim attribution of the term.
Yeah, so it's been around for quite some time. You'll notice that it did come out of the government, which I think, a lot of folks who work in cyber threat intelligence and cybersecurity and are working in defense now have backgrounds in whether that's military, government, intelligence agencies. And I think in many ways that has contributed to this bias of focusing on nation-state adversaries. I mean, even the term adversary, right? That's something, it's tossed around a lot in our industry, but to the average person, it's not an adversary, it's a hacker, it's someone who's messing with my life.
It reminds me of you'll see on the local evening news with there'll be some sort of local crime, and the police will use what I call cop speak, which is, a perpetrator entered the edifice and drew his weapon, and it's like a bad guy went in and had a gun.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So, I mean, thinking of the roots here, when we look back on the history, does it make sense that there was a focus on APTs, particularly in the time before the explosion of ransomware?
I think so. But again, I think that kind of goes back to the bias, right? So I think, how we know about APT, whatever threat actors, is large part due to Mandiant's APT-1 report back in 2013. That was, Chinese cyber espionage, and that's how it really became this industry standard. So we're thinking about APT, we're thinking about nation-state actors, we're thinking about, the the trouble that they cause, in large part because that's the mindset and the focus of a lot of people that are working on these problems. But cybercrime, ransomware, and certainly banking Trojans, even before ransomware, were a multi-million-dollar business, right? You have threat actors that were working on banking Trojans essentially to steal people's money, and they were using real money as opposed to cryptocurrency to commit crimes. But in the early and mid-2000s, that's consumer-focused ransomware. So it's not the big game hunting that it evolved to in 2014 through 2016. But you have in 2007 banking Trojans, Zeus, Gozi. They really created this business models where threat actors were targeting banking details and at very large scales, right? And then when Bitcoin really came on the scene, that was again 2009. So this is early days of Bitcoin, but it really disrupted the criminal ecosystem. And you have things, that grew out of the sort of, usefulness of crypto as a criminal enterprise. So you have Game Over Zeus, Crypto Locker ransomware. As I said in the paper, they sort of kickstarted the age of the cybercrime kingpin in the mid 2010s. So you have the big sort of botnets that started as banking Trojans, evolved to be loaders for ransomware that we know today, APT-centric, Dridex. And then, this is really when it started becoming a problem. But I don't think we focused on that enough as an industry in general, writ large, because I do think in part we were still very much biased towards APT. And I think to the benefit of the threat actors, frankly, because they were making lots of money, and going after schools, hospitals, city and state governments, a lot of entities that were getting hammered by ransomware. But it wasn't really until Colonial Pipeline happened in around 2021 that we started thinking, oh wait, maybe ransomware can be bad. Certainly there were people working on this problem for a long time, but I think I told this story at SleuthCon last year, but my sister has been impacted by ransomware 4 different times. She's worked in the healthcare industry, and since 2016, she's had multiple different ransomware attacks impact her life in different ways throughout the years. Most recently, even last year, she was impacted by it, and it took down an application that she was using for, important life things.
Right.
And she's just like, this is just my life now. I guess this is just what happens. She's like, you'll never guess what happens, Selena. And I'm just like thinking my sister is just a regular person who's had her life disrupted by criminals multiple times. And she just feels like that's the norm. And that is what really makes me sad.
How much of the bias do you think we're dealing with today? I mean, your average CISO who's out there deciding how to divvy up their resources, how are they dialing it in?
I think actually I do have to give a little bit of credit to marketing and journalism in general as well for, highlighting APT. Because frankly, spies are cool. You think it's very cool to have these stories on espionage and disruption and, stealing information to improve, their standing in the global economy. But I think a lot of it is just like people think APTs are cooler. And so they want to learn about them. They want to know about them. They want to, make sure that they are, protected by them. But in general, your average organization is at a much, much greater risk of being impacted and targeted by cybercrime than any nation-state threat actor in general. And I think, it's changing a little bit as we, continue to talk about it and continue to have these types of conversations. But I still think it's very much there because there's this idea, APTs are cooler.
We'll be right back. And now, a message from our sponsor, Zscaler, the leader in cloud security. Enterprises have spent billions of dollars on firewalls and VPNs, yet breaches continue to rise by an 18% year-over-year increase in ransomware attacks and a $75 million record payout in 2024. These traditional security tools expand your attack surface with public-facing IPs that are exploited by bad actors more easily than ever with AI tools. It's time to rethink your security. Zscaler Zero Trust plus AI stops attackers by hiding your attack surface, making apps and IPs invisible, eliminating lateral movement, connecting users only to specific apps, not the entire network, continuously verifying every request based on identity and context, simplifying security management with AI-powered automation, and detecting threats using AI to analyze over 500 billion daily transactions. Hackers can't attack what they can't see. Protect your organization with Zscaler Zero Trust and AI. Learn more at zscaler.com/security. Your business needs AI solutions that are not only ambitious, but also practical and adaptable. That's where Domo's AI and data products platform comes in. With Domo, you can channel AI and data into innovative uses that deliver measurable impact. Secure AI agents connect, prepare, and automate your data workflows, helping you gain insights, receive alerts, and act with ease through guided apps tailored to your role. Data is hard. Domo is easy. Learn more at ai.domo.com. That's ai.domo.com. I wonder too, because it seems to me like, particularly in the earlier days of APTs, it was kind of a get out of jail free card for any
Yes.
organization who got hit. You know, you would just your your communications person would stand up in front of a microphone and say, there was nothing we could do. We were attacked by foreign adversaries
Yes.
with endless resources, and so, you know, poor us. There's absolutely nothing we could have done. And people would kind of say, well, that makes sense, and go on with their business. And only occasionally would we later find out that it was a kid, you know, with in a clubhouse or a treehouse or their parents' basement, you know, who brought down this major organization or something.
Yep. I mean, absolutely. So the way that we talk about different threat actors impacts the way that we think about different threat actors. And I think, you know, having that sort of APT moniker is a little bit of a get out of jail free card. However, I would say on the flip side of that, though, not all APTs, you know, state actors are advanced. And many cybercriminal actors are considerably more advanced and sophisticated than, you know, some state adversaries. We've even seen some crossover with cybercriminal threat actors operating on behalf of governments. There are certainly examples of this happening in Russia, for example. And there's like overlap there too. And I think, you know, from just like a fundamental like defense and like TTP perspective, in many ways, and this is my super mega hot take, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but you know, in many ways, attribution doesn't actually matter. It doesn't matter if there's a financially motivated threat actor or an espionage threat actor. What matters are the behaviors and making sure that your organization is defended against them. There are, of course, you know, situations in which attribution does definitely matter. It depends on, you know, we're looking at it, but from a fundamentally technical perspective, if we're seeing the increase of, you know, ransomware actors, cybercriminal threat actors using 0 days, investing and developing tooling and resources that are in many ways more advanced than what we're seeing from APT or state actors, there's not that sort of like distinction between, oh, state actors are a lot more advanced, or, oh, you know, cyber criminals are just dumb kids, we don't have to worry about it, and, you know, my insurance will take care of that, or whatever. They're operating at a level that is very high, and you have to be, you know, very, very mindful about it. And the impact is so much greater to the general population and our communities at large. Like, you know, a ransomware attack on a school has significant impacts to the students, you know, safety, their education, their resources. If a school's closed because they can't go to because they had a ransomware attack, parents can't go to work, so they have to rearrange their lives. You know, like there's all of these sort of like follow-on repercussions from a lot of this activity that, in my opinion, makes it a threat to our communities and our way of life and national security. You know, in different ways from the state actors, stealing IP or, pre-positioning potentially for potentially critical infrastructure disruption, which of course would have its own very large impacts. But yeah, it's I don't think it's an either or anymore. And I think, we have to be very, very mindful of that. We have to check our biases at the door when we're thinking about cyber defense and fighting back against these adversaries.
What about some of the federal organizations? And I'm thinking specifically of folks like CISA. Are they overly focused on APTs at the cost of the hospitals, of the schools, of those sorts of things? Or is a sense that they're out there, fighting the good fight, doing the best they can with what they've got?
That's a good question. I know it's a very hard problem to solve. There are, of course, limited resources that, various agencies have to be mindful of. But I do think that there is still a bias in what we're thinking about, what we're looking at from sort of a national level, sort of assessment. I think we've seen a lot of great success in other countries kind of dealing with this. I think the NCA is a great example, the National Crime Agency in the UK. They have done a really, really great job prioritizing ransomware in particular, but a lot of these cyber criminal operations that are having very, very big impacts to, the people in their communities. And we've seen the disruption of Lockbit, Kronos. We've seen, some certainly Operation Endgame, which of course, U.S. Law enforcement and U.S. government agencies were involved in as well, which was a massive, massive blow to cyber criminal operations, which was a huge win. But yeah, I do think it could be talked about and focused on a little bit more in some of these conversations. But, of course, I do know that, I think, China is really the main APT that I think a lot of organizations and intelligence agencies are really focusing on, which, of course, is totally reasonable with the various activity that has come to light over the last year. It is impactful and it is very, very important. So I do understand that there, of course, is a balance, and it can be very, very difficult to to figure out where to put those resources when we have, limits.
Yeah, I wonder, because I find myself, and this is just, my personal take on this, that I find myself sometimes frustrated that we have situations, for example, where hospitals have to shut down. And you brought up the point that we have lost lives because of this. If a foreign nation were sending people here and physically shutting down hospitals, the response to that would be one of overwhelming force, I believe. And yet, here we are. Do you understand my frustration? Or I guess maybe head scratching is a better word for it?
Dave, absolutely. I have the same reaction. And I think it's really challenging to, focus on this and say, well, it's understandable, or like to kind of be working in a space when you're like, this is such a big problem. Like, why aren't we doing more? Why can't we do more? And I mean, certainly just people in my own life who have been impacted by this and have had some of these experiences, certainly in healthcare in particular. The impacts are just so awful to the people, like not being able to get your medication, not being able to have your surgery, potentially having ambulances diverted to other places for care. It's like, it's very, very impactful to the human experience. And I don't know why, it has, taken quite such a long time for everyone to be like, oh, wait, this is like a big problem. And I think in general, the cybersecurity industry could use a little bit more empathy all around, not just for ransomware impacting, various organizations that, have a really, really, really very difficult time and oftentimes are shut down. But also, we've talked about this in the past too, like romance scams in general, people being impacted and targeted by crime that is, quote unquote, just digital. The same reason, someone came up and purse snatched you in person, people are going to care about that. That's going to be really, really hard. But if someone, social engineers you and steals your money, there's just this lack of empathy. And to me, that's been probably one of the most difficult parts about working in this industry is sort of seeing that and being like, wait, this is a big deal. We should care about this. We need to focus on this. And other people maybe not necessarily agreeing.
So how do you suggest we move the needle here? How can we redirect the conversation and get the emphasis where it needs to be?
So I think it's really important to, change the mindset across the board, how we're talking about these threat actors, how we're understanding some of the risks and impacts. I mean, I mentioned this before, but the reality is most organizations are at a far greater risk of being targeted by cyber criminals. And I think it's really important, threat intelligence practitioners, people reporting on this, certainly in the media, is to make, to tell those stories and the impacts from, a business perspective, but also very much a human perspective. And I also think it's very important for us to focus on the TTPs, right? The tactics, techniques, and procedures, and not necessarily the who, but the how, right? So, if you're in your organization and you're developing detections and you're trying to prioritize, what do we care about? Maybe think less about the who, but think about the how. What are the major techniques that are being used by these adversaries? What are the ways that we can make sure that our organization is defended? How can we be educating our users to not necessarily fall for some of these techniques? And really make sure that, regardless of who is behind the behaviors, do as much as you can to prevent any sort of exploitation of known, TTPs, so that you're defended, whether it's a state actor that's using them or whether it's a ransomware actor that's using them. And I think too, we've seen some really great successes over the last year in terms of when it comes to disrupting cybercrime. And I think, that old chestnut, public-private partnerships, which is a phrase, that I think gets thrown around a lot. But it is also very important. And I think Operation Endgame is really sort of the standard at which all of these things should be, upheld to, right? I mean, we saw it was a cross-government, cross-country, many, many different organizations were involved, and they went after, not just the ransomware itself, but the ecosystem that enabled ransomware, right? It was, of course, a long time investigating, but it was a lot of sharing between many, many people to having a common collective goal of disrupting these things, cutting the head off the snake, so to speak. But of course, It was 5 different heads because it was multiple different malware families. But it's huge. I mean, Europol called it the largest ever operation against botnets, which played a major role in the deployment of ransomware. That was a huge win. And I really, really hope that, we can learn a lot from that and hopefully moving forward see much, much more of that.
All right. Well, the research is titled Why Biasing Advanced Persistent Threats Over Cybercrime is a Security Risk. Selena Larson, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Dave. I will happily talk about e-crime with anyone.
There you go. Our thanks to Selena Larson from Proofpoint for joining us. The research is titled Why Biasing Advanced Persistent Threats Over Cybercrime is a Security Risk. We'll have a link in the show notes. And that's Research Saturday, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. If you like our show, please share a rating and review in your favorite podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes or send an email to cyberwire@n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Stokes. We're mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Peter Kilpie is our publisher, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next time.